In October of 2019, Help Wanted would receive a Halloween update DLC known as The Curse of Dreadbear. Now, the DLC is in-game, an existing game, and was possibly launched by Glitchtrap itself, as when we enter the main hub for this DLC, there is an added voice note which refers to this game as having no hidden intent or purposes, which does appear to be very sketchy.
Keep in mind that this DLC pack is nothing more than a festive holiday-themed add-on, which has absolutely no hidden intent or purpose. So, have fun!
It appears that the beta tester for this game is in fact the same character who was testing in the original Help Wanted and has since been corrupted by Glitchtrap. Curse of Dreadbear would go on to continue the lore that we've seen in Help Wanted. The car in the hub resembles the one from Midnight Motorist and even has purple lights under certain circumstances, and the banner that we see reads Fallfest 83, the year in which Freddy's launched, and also possibly the year in which Afton used this car to kill Charlie. The spooky mansion itself appears to have the most lore relevance surrounding it, as it does appear to be the same house from FNAF 4, as we can see when comparing them side by side, and this would in fact be the house in which Mike, the creator of the game, grew up in. The haunted corridor may in fact be a nightmare Mike experienced, or even be testing that was conducted during his childhood. The Build a Mangle game being situated in the spooky mansion but also in the fulfillment centre would seem to imply that the two sites are linked in some way, and this would seem to make sense as we see in Sister Location that the house is in fact linked to the bunker underneath, which is large and very much like a factory. And the Trick or Treat minigame would also show us that the house can be used for Halloween events featuring the Freddy's characters, which we seem to get a hint of in the logbook based on one of the doodles. Dreadbear is by far the most curious of these four minigames, as the titular Dreadbear, who may in fact be a reference to Fredbear based on the similarity of the names, is Frankensteined to life after having his brain augmented by the player, which may in fact be alluding to the events that FNAF World implies, which seems to involve making the crying child happy again. Now, the Danger Keep Out levels appear to be a rundown version of the FNAF 1 site, possibly even showing it in its current state, as we know by 2017 in FNAF 3 that this site was indeed abandoned when Springtrap was found. During this level, it is possible to trigger a scan for glitches implanted by the company. This may in fact be the ulterior hidden intent or purpose that the company denies existing for this game, as they have created it specifically as a means of trying to lure and catch Glitchtrap and defeat him. The Afraid of the Dark games do appear to be the less lore heavy of the group, with the Plushkin patch literally just being a reskin of the Plush Baby game from Help Wanted, and Foxy's Pirate Ride is literally just a fun shoot 'em up. As far as I can tell, there is no actual lore hidden within the Foxy Ride. It does seem to feature many parts of previous games, but as we can tell, this is probably just sets that are being used for this ride. The corn maze, however, is the most important of the three, it would seem, and it is entirely possible that based on Marla recollecting the hay maze of her youth, she may have in actual fact been relating to the corn maze, which Mike has adapted for this game. Once the player has collected all four keys, a fifth glitched purple key will appear within the maze, which will grant them access to a secret bunker somewhere in the maze. When entering this, it is discovered that there is in actual fact a mask, which the player wins and then becomes accessible in the main hub of Help Wanted. If the player holds up the Glitchtrap plush and also puts on the mask that they win in the core maze, then they will reveal a hidden conversation between Glitchtrap and his now possessed associate.
Yes, I hear you. I know. No. There's no miscommunication. I understand. Yes, I have it. I made it myself. I think you would like it. No one suspects anything. Don't worry. I'll be ready. And I won't let you down. It will be fun.
Now, also interestingly, we find that the vengeful spirit still appears to linger as a secret trigger within the barn where we have the game overs / games wins will give us 3 pictures. When these pictures are all clowns, throwing a dart at each one of them will in fact reveal the "It's me" slogan associated with the spirit. Now, it is unclear whether this is indeed actually the spirit, or whether it's just a fun Easter egg added by Mike as part of the game. However, we do know from Fazbear Frights that the vengeful spirit may in fact still be around at this time. And so there are 2 stories within Fazbear's Frights which do appear to link in with the lore that has been explored in Help Wanted and Dreadbear. So, Prankster. Jeremiah is a games developer hired by his company 4 years ago and has seen it decline over the past 3 years until only himself, Hope and Parker are employed there, with Parker being the title character who is the prankster. They have an absent boss who does not appear in the story, and it is noted that Fazbear's Frights buys out the company in order to make a VR game. On Jeremiah's birthday, he is subjected to a horrific prank by Parker, where a chain of puzzles in separate rooms reveals what appears to be dismembered parts of his colleagues. Now, it's possible we could link this company with the one that we see in Help Wanted. The absent manager could well be Dave, who is mentioned in Tape Girl's tapes, and this may also go in some way to implying that Hope, being the only girl left at the company, may actually be Tape Girl. Jeremiah is also notably given the nickname of Jeremy, and we even see on his birthday cake that it is written as Jeremy, so the Remember Jeremy from Help Wanted may in fact help to show us that this is Jeremy. During the prank, we find what appears to be Parker's skinned face, and what would Jeremy go on to do while playtesting the game? Slice off his own face with a paper guillotine, possibly using the traumatic memory of the prank as his means of escaping from Glitchtrap. Now, the ending is left ambiguous, but I do believe that it was indeed actually just a prank. The fingers that were meant to be Hope's were noted to not have specific freckles, implying that it was indeed not Hope's dismembered body. The face was used in order to encourage Jeremy to believe it was actually a real event, not a prank, as having known him to be pranked many times, Parker would have anticipated this. The ending even shows us that Jeremiah is basically just shell-shocked, as the video that he is watching implies that Parker planned for him to end up at this location, and the TV even says to himself that Parker is in the closet and to come out, and we never do see who comes out of the closet due to the cliffhanger, but it very well could be that it was just Parker, because the man is pretty sick with the jokes. It is entirely possible as well that after this severe traumatizing of Jeremy, Parker was presumably fired for his conduct. And so, based on the timeline that we have so far for Help Wanted, this would imply that if this is indeed the first playtesters, then this story takes place before the events that are mentioned in Tape Girl's tapes. Now, Jeremiah notes he would go to Freddy's as a child, given his age is not that high. This would be during the end of the 90s or the early 2000s, and as we will see from various Fazbear's Frights stories, it would appear that Freddy's as a brand went into decline in the early 2000s prior to the opening of Circus Baby's rental. During the story, we see Jeremiah has 2 friends from college named Matt and Ty, who he meets at Leonardo's Pizza. Matt is of particular interest to us, as he has the same name as a figure from our next story, but certain details seem too murky whether or not this could be the same figure. So, In the Flesh shows us Matt, a game developer who works on coding for a new AI in a VR game intended to be part of the Freddy's game series named Springtrap's Revenge. Due to it featuring Springtrap, we can infer that the story occurs after the events of FNAF 3 were developed into a game by Animdude, potentially even after Help Wanted releases, as Matt works for a company, and we know Mike was an indie developer before he partnered with Fazbear's. In order to create his AI, Matt studies serial killers and program it in order to make it derive joy from killing. His rage and frustration in life, however, would appear to corrupt the AI with Remnant, and when in his anger he sets the time frame of the game, and so left to basically exist for what it would perceive as hundreds of years without anything to kill, it goes insane. It eventually learns to evolve to the point where it can duplicate itself in order to have something to kill, and then somehow it learns to fragment itself until it is able to transfer its code to a living player in contact with the game using an electric shock. Now, over time, Matt bloats as the code that shocks him essentially rewrites his cells in order to grow a full biological Springtrap baby inside him, leaching nutrients from his body. It even has real fur. Upon realizing what is happening, Matt takes a knife and cuts open his own abdomen in order to remove it, ending his own life in the process. The whereabouts of the little Springtrap after this are currently unknown in the timeline. Meanwhile, a man named Gene hacks into the game in order to find an early copy, but only finds the Springtrap's immobile and mangled AI body with an export file named itsaboy.exe. It is unknown after this point if Springtrap's Revenge actually launches. Now, the way the virus essentially rewrites Matt's biology to grow a parasitic entity would be a interesting plot point in a few of the Fazbear's Fright stories, potentially hinting at some kind of progression of this technology by someone, as we see similar concepts in He Told Me Everything, Sea Bonnies and Gumdrop Angel. Now, we see that where Matt works, there is a ye old steakhouse across the road, which is similar to that which we see in the Sergio story, and so it's possible that this is in fact the same office building. The two stories being 30 years apart means between then it may have been repurposed, obviously. There is also an Italian place called Neapolitan in town, as well as a pub called Gussie's, which is only a half block from the office. Now, we know that Matt in the story is something of a jerk. He marries his wife Hannah after college, and they are divorced in a year before he moves on to Brianna, a local waitress, among many others. Interestingly, given his behaviour, Matt may actually be the Matt from Prankster. He would have studied computing at college. Matt is notably fat in both stories, and one thing that does stand out, however, is Matt in the Prankster notably has a wife and a son, Connor. However, there is the possibility here that if this is the same Matt, he may well just be lying to them to appear like he has it good compared to them, as he is quite a jerk and it would not be out of character for him. And this is the only time that they actually meet up, and so they could have actually never met his wife or child. Matt also knows Jason, who is his roommate and friend from college, and he treats him terribly, going so far as to try and steal his date on a double date. Jason would be the one who finds his body after the incident occurs. Again, his treatment of Jason would imply that if he did believe Jeremy and Ty to be his friends, it doesn't mean that he would be above lying to them. A few other side characters are seen within the story. Gary, who is head of Matt's department. Jamie is a nosy busybody within Matt's office. Megan and Eva from the double date that he has with Jason. And Emma, a large-built girl who calls him a hypocrite for judging her when he himself is more overweight than what she is. Now, these stories do raise one interesting point in universe, in that the FNAF games are indeed part of a series of games that exist within the game's world. And we can infer, based on certain games such as FNAF World, that Freddy in Space 2 is implied to exist by an extension of FNAF World in the canon. We do find, as far forward on the timeline as Security Breach is concerned, that Freddy's in Space is indeed apparently canon, as it features prominently in the Phaser Blast arena. And by this logic, it may also be possible that Fury's Rage is also indeed canon. Freddy in Space 2 being canon does raise some strange connotations for the fandom, as we can see that certain bosses within the game appear to canonize the existence of MatPat, Markiplier and Doko within the lore. And we do see Markiplier again in the special delivery trailer, implying that he is indeed a character that exists within their world. And as we see, Animdude appears in both of these games, so it is entirely possible that Animdude is again the creator of these games. Now, the S. Cotton boss in Freddy in Space is obviously a self-insert of Scott, and given the in-universe nature of the game, he may just be intended to be a character in the game and not actually Scott himself, as he inserts himself into the lore as Animdude. And so, based on the fact that Scott also was the villain in the FNAF World version of Freddy in Space, it is entirely possible that S. Cotton is just a character that was created by the game developer for the Freddy in Space franchise. We also get the appearance of Roxy in the teasers for the game, but not in the actual game itself, and this would appear to show that this was early in her character development, and so this would place the launch of this game as being before the Pizzaplex was finalised as a concept. Which brings us to the Fazbear Fanverse initiative, which Scott set up to assist many Freddy fan game series, and as we can see, some of them appear as Easter eggs in Security Breach. It can be implied they are somewhat canon, perhaps existing as franchises spun off, created in-universe as part of the fandom surrounding the urban legend of Freddy's. These franchises would be Five Nights at Candy's, The Joy of Creation, Pop Goes, One Night at Flumpty's, and FNAF Plus. And so we come to Fury's Rage. This game does have many Easter eggs in its characters and level design. Level 1 we see is a retro town and features enemies such as Chipper, Chica, and Mangle. The boss is the VR Sisters, which is a strange inclusion, as so far we have not seen any figures that resemble this, and it seems to link back to Help Wanted with the VR headsets, and some in the fandom do genuinely believe that this is a connection between the fact that Vanny supposedly has a twin. Level 2 would show us a much more rundown area, and we will see Broiler Baby, Clowntrap and Radioactive Foxy, all enemies that are part of the lore that we will see in FNAF AR. Soul Brawler is the boss linked to FNAF World that we see in this level, as he is basically an alternate version of Soul Dozer, again tying back Scott's previous game series such as Desolate Hope and bringing them somewhat into the canon. Interestingly, in this level we can also see Scrap Trap in the background, implying that this occurs between the events of FNAF 3 and FNAF 6. Now, level 3 takes place in what appears to be a mall, potentially the Pizzaplex, and we are attacked by the puppets as well as the VR Sisters, who make a return here, not as bosses but as very high level enemies. Now, why the puppet specifically is an enemy is unknown, although the puppet is severely represented in Security Breach, it would appear, by the staff bots, as they do appear to be very much based on the puppet, and the inclusion of VR Sisters may imply again the connection to Vanny now being in the Pizzaplex and potentially having a duplicate. The boss for this level would be a Mega Brow, who is a version of Brow Boy that we see in FNAF World. Level 4 takes place in what appears to be an assembly line production factory, possibly the fulfillment centre in the undertunnels of the Pizzaplex. We see Freddy Frostbear as an enemy, who interestingly enough we will see in AR is actually considered a character, not a skin, and is therefore an actual entity. And also we find in this area there are pods. There are weird stasis pods which do appear based on the shape to hold Circus Baby. The enemy of this area is Vanny, and implies that Vanny is the main threat within the underworkings of the Pizzaplex. There's a secret 5th level which appears to be on some kind of spaceship, possibly based on Freddy in Space, and in this place we see a baby's blueprint on a screen, as well as a screen from one of the FNAF cameras, and the enemy that we meet is the Dreamgeist, a strange worm-like entity that has keyholes along its body. Eye is an alarm clock from the FNAF 4 End of Night sequence. There's a Chica doll with no beak, a grandfather clock, ball pit balls, a key, microphones, what appears to be a pizza, an IV bag, which all seem to in some way relate back to the lore of FNAF 4. So it can be determined then that level 1 represents the classical era of Freddy's, and level 2 is the era where the suits are being lured in to FNAF 6, as seen by Scraptrap, as we see him in this level, and the appearance of the clown traps as well as the circus nearby may also tie in with the dark circus that appears in FNAF AR. Level 3 appears to be the Mega Pizzaplex, and level 4 the fulfillment centre areas underneath which the company use. The Dreamgeist now is a strange entity, as we so far have determined that the box, as far as I can make out, represents Mike's repressed trauma about what happened. The Chica doll that we see has no beak, and it is connected to the Chica doll that we see in FNAF 4's minigames, which is instrumental in the logic that I use in order to deduce that FNAF 4 does indeed actually occur in the year 1987. The clock that we see relates to the FNAF World task of reviving the crying child, and which ties us back in with the pizza and the microphone, both items that would have been associated with the bite that occurred in Freddy's. The IV bag being seen by Mike when his brother was in the hospital, and the digital clock being the clock he awakens to during his nightmares, would also tie back to this storyline. The ball pit does seem to be an overarching lore device out of all of these things that we've seen. As we see in Fazbear's Frights, it links all the incidents at Freddy's across the timeline with the remnant it contains. It has years of connection to the actual Fazbear site, and as we see in the Fazbear's Frights stories, it would appear to tie back to the appearance of the baby blueprints, as Baby herself was instrumental in the events of that story, and as she is both in the pod in the fulfillment centre as well as the blueprints, it is odd that she is so heavily featured here, unless this is setting up for her potential future return, potentially even implying her importance in the lore of the novels that exist at this point already. And so that concludes our very meta dive into the events surrounding the release of games in the Freddy's universe and how they correlate back on the actual lore that already exists. In the next few videos, I'm going to look at the Stitch Wraith Stingers saga as well as FNAF AR, as I believe that the events within these can help to create a very exact pinpointing of where exactly all of these major parts of the lore fall on a timeline relative to each other. And so I will see you next time.